Good morning and welcome to this morning's breakfast briefing. Sorry we're not able to provide you with bacon baps this morning, but maybe next time. On behalf of the Isle of Man Funds and Wealth Association and the Finance Agency of the Isle of Man Government, we are delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you today, ahead of what should be an interesting virtual seminar. Specialists have been administrating funds in the Isle of Man for over 30 years now and have built up an excellent reputation for quality of service at the highest level. The funds industry on the Isle of Man is long established, going back over 30 years, and the Funds and Wealth Association is the relevant trade body that looks after the interests of this sector. The island itself is self-governing, politically and economically very stable. But don't just take my word for it. Our stability is recognised by the IMF, OECD and FATFA. We have pragmatic, mature regulation provided by our own Financial Services Authority, and we can offer a Moody's AA stable rating. My own role is with the Finance Agency, part of the Department for Enterprise here on the Isle of Man. We are a true private public sector group with a strong working relationship with all the different financial services sectors here on the island. Obviously, 2020 is turning out to be one of the strangest in all our living memories, certainly mine. And as we get used to the new norm and an uncertain future, rest assured that our island is well equipped to deal with anything. In fact, our country motto is, whichever way you throw me, I will stand. Our industries moved swiftly back in March, invoking the disaster recovery plans you don't think you will ever need to use. And within hours, we were up and running, working remotely, servicing existing clients and taking on the new. Resilience was the word that I kept hearing during lockdown, and we were fortunate that our politicians made the early decision to close our borders, which kept the evil of COVID-19 to a minimum and allowed us to get back to a normal life around late June. And the first pubs to reopen in the British Isles? Yes, you guessed it, here on the Isle of Man. The purpose of this morning's briefing is to provide you with more knowledge and information about our offering and our services, to allow you to make an informed choice about where to base your fund administration, or even yourself in these uncertain times. We will now show you a short video about the Isle of Man before we commence the panel event. Thank you. Catherine, can you explain what can the Isle of Man offer the wider funds industry today?
From a technical side, the Isle of Man has a great choice of corporate vehicles. A fund can be established as a unit trust or a limited partnership or a limited company, and the Isle of Man's company regime is very flexible, so it's a great place to set up a flexible fund. And from the funds offering itself, we see most commonly exempt schemes, which are private arrangements, can have a maximum of 50, has to be fewer than 50 investors, and can't be offered to the public. But it's not registered with the FSA. There aren't stringent rules and requirements for how you make investments and so on. It's a very flexible vehicle. If you are going to be promoting slightly to institutional investors or high net worths, you might want to consider a specialist fund, which is, again, is very flexible in how you can invest, but there is a minimum initial investment. It's $100,000, and your investors must certify that they meet a certain criteria. And we sometimes see funds set up as an exempt scheme, so a private arrangement, but then sort of work their way up, upgrade and become a specialist fund. We also see closed-ended investment companies which sit outside our funds regime in the Isle of Man if they're not promoted to the public. Again, they don't need to be registered with the FSA. They're not subject to stringent requirements or audit requirements, particularly useful for private equity type investment. So I don't know, Cath, if you want to speak more on the administration side.
Yeah, no, we see exempts specifically for startups, especially for a smaller manager who wants to start up. They want to get a track record, and after a couple of years they can then go into a specialist fund or even a qualifying investor fund. So we have all the Isle of Man products, but we also, as administrators, see a lot of other jurisdictional funds that we administer, the likes of Cayman funds, BVI, Malta, just to name a few. And I think we cover a wide range of complexities, from your straightforward vanilla hedge funds to your more complex structures on private equity structures you would see.
So, Cath, tell me, what are the core strengths of the funds industry in the Isle of Man?
I think the core strengths we have are we've got a very strong regulatory regime here on the island, and I think most administrators have very good working relationships with the regulator as well. It's to pick up the phone, ask questions. They work very well with the industry. We're a European time zone, which also helps. A lot of our managers are based in London or Europe. And I think one of the other cool things is the staff, the resilience of the staff that we have here, the expertise of the staff. I think from my experience, on average, in other jurisdictions, the longevity of staff is 3 to 5 years experience. In my office alone, we've got 15 years experience as the average across the team. So I think the staff really does bring an awful lot to it, and as well, treating how we treat the clients. You get the same treatment if you're a $1 billion client as if you're a $1 million client, so you really do get that expertise when you work with the Isle of Man administrators and the Isle of Man fund industry.
So, Catherine, can I ask, what trends are we currently noticing in funds in the Isle of Man?
We've seen quite a lot of interest from Asia recently in setting up funds in the Isle of Man. We've seen funds investing with new technologies, a lot of use of algorithmic trading, funds that are investing in esports, which is quite interesting. We've seen some new specialist funds set up recently, which is good news. Some of those are taking advantage of the new exempt manager regime. So whilst providing asset management services in the Isle of Man normally requires a licence from the Financial Services Authority, there are exemptions for exempt schemes and specialist funds if you meet certain requirements. So we have seen people taking advantage of that and setting up their own asset management operations on the Isle of Man as well, which is good news. We've also seen quite a lot of use of PCC structures, so that's a protected cell company, which is one legal entity, but it can create separate cells with segregated assets and liabilities, which has a lot more legal certainty than just setting up sub-funds with separate share classes. So it's a real advantage of setting up a fund in the Isle of Man. Cath, what have you seen from the administrator's point of view?
Yeah, we've seen a lot more queries, and with this uncertain times, we've been very pleasantly surprised that we've seen growth. Our AUA has been up since December of last year. We're seeing net inflows month on month during the year, and we've had a few queries from Asia, and again it's the exempt, the startups of getting a sort of track record history we're seeing more and more queries of. So it's very positive at the moment from an administrative perspective as well. Simon, have you got anything from a government perspective you've seen?
Yes, actually just today the Financial Services Authority issued their quarterly funds bulletin. And it's pleasing to see that there is a continuing increase in new funds. The exempt fund is still the most popular, with 17 new exempt funds issued between March and June this year. Also of interest is the fact that now Isle of Man fund administrators are administrating over 100 domiciled Cayman or BVI funds.
Yeah.
So, Cath, you've actually worked in some other jurisdictions outside of the Isle of Man. How does the Isle of Man compare?
Yeah, fortunately I have. Well, it's not as hot as some of the locations I've worked at, put it that way. But no, I think the sort of real outstanding point to highlight to everybody is the staff. as I mentioned before, the longevity of staff is more of an average of 15 years here than, the larger European offices where that they're job hopping for £2,000 every 2 years. There's no real commute in the Isle of Man. It's either 5 minutes or 20 minutes at a max. So you really do see the work-life balance here. Staff are looked after and they really take pride in what they do. And once they've found a good company to work for, they are there for the long haul. Then it means the benefits then for the clients that come in is that, they're working with someone to set up the fund from scratch, but they will be with that fund throughout the life cycle of that fund. And we really do find that is the key that makes our clients very, very happy. And I think it's across the board in all the companies on the island. You do see the longevity of staff, and the work-life balance makes a big difference. I think if your staff are happy, the clients are happy, the work gets done at the end of the day.
And from a regulatory perspective, have you noticed any differences?
Yeah, no, I'm more confident here in picking up the phone to the regulator. They will answer you and they will help you. Whereas in some of the jurisdictions, they're a bigger beast, so it's a lot harder to get the right people. Whereas here, you've got dedicated people and they're very open and helpful. And I think that really does help in the relationship to grow the fund industry here on the island.
And what about the relationship here with the government?
Yeah, no, well, obviously, Simon, we work with you closely. And I think our government, especially over the last few months, have been outstanding for a small island. And I think that's just shown how we've handled COVID. I think, already during COVID, we had questionnaires coming out from the government to how companies are handling it, how our staff are handling it. And, they do listen to us. They do listen to the industry. They do engage in multiple workshops and changes. And so I think the government actually are very engaged, and I'm very impressed with the government, especially this year.
Obviously, we came out of COVID-19 lockdown back in June. What lessons do you think the Isle of Man learns, and what outcomes do you think we learned from that period?
I think obviously putting in the BCP in place very quickly, I was surprised at how well the staff adapted. Obviously, you had to work more with some staff than others, with children being at home and changing some hours, but the resilience of the staff and actually the productivity actually increased, I found. And I think a lot of other companies found that from staff working from home. And I think as well it sort of forces into moving fully paperless during the period, which again helping the environment. And I think a lot of companies now are taking what they've learnt from going paperless and digital and bringing it into the day-to-day. Now they're back in the office. So it was interesting and surprising in some of the results. Yep.
Cath?
I think as an association, we held a Zoom meeting with the regulator, and we had a workshop discussing use of electronic CDD. Was particularly topical during lockdown, so it was interesting to speak to the regulator in that way, with using a sort of Zoom platform. And I think it's something that we will see more of going forward. On the committee for our association, where we now are back to having regular physical meetings, but we'll have a dial-in option so that there's more flexibility for people don't have to physically travel to the meeting. And I think that's something that will be a long-lasting lesson, to be more flexible in how we do these things.
Yes.
And from a government point of view, how did you find it, Simon?
Obviously an interesting time. I spent the first 2 or 3 weeks of lockdown ringing round all number of businesses, both small, medium and large, just to see how they were coping. And I was amazed at how quick they had adapted to A, working from home, B, communicating with their customers, and C, keeping normal working practices going and still writing new business. It was amazing. Resilience is a word that we've kept coming up with, but that really, to me, underpins what Isle of Man businesses were all about during lockdown. The regulator, I know, were in touch with businesses on a weekly basis. They've received excellent feedback, and I think all in all, it galvanised the Isle of Man public-private sector to work together even more, and it just showed what a close-knit community that we are on the island.
Yeah, and I think it also put us in good light with our clients. I think the feedback from the clients, we were able to deliver all the SLAs. There was no delays, and I think that's across the board in a lot of the industries over here. That the impact, and the clients were very, very impressed that the actual COVID and working from home didn't have an impact on their day to day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tell me, how does the Isle of Man continue to offer premium service delivery in a cost-effective manner?
I think we still focus on what we are very strong at. The Isle of Man is relatively low-cost location in relation to obviously properties. It's lower tax. There's no restrictions on property for people coming over to buy, purchase, and salaries are a lot lower than what you would have to charge in larger cities. So I think that is sort of the key focusing, and obviously, as I said, listening to clients and looking what's happening in the industry and moving and sort of be proactive instead of reactive, especially in these times where things are changing so rapidly.
Okay. Cath?
The Isle of Man doesn't run a production factory for funds. We offer a bespoke service. You get time and attention to detail, and one of the real benefits from going to the Isle of Man is you get it right first time. It's worth paying to get something done properly once than having to pay to fix problems. So we will give you attention to detail.
Excellent.
So Simon, what do you think the future holds for the fund industry?
I think the future is bright, very, very bright, for all the reasons that we've put forward in this morning's breakfast briefing. But also more than that, we are looking to come up with a new fund, but we need the help of the delegates today. If you could go on to SurveyMonkey, which is on the webinar webpage, there's a series of short questions. We want you to tell us what you would like to see in a new fund in the Isle of Man that you can then sell to your clients. It's a win-win. What you also could win-win is an excellent hamper of Manx produce. You will go into a draw just by filling in a series of short questions. We'd really love it if you could do that today. We'd like to thank you for your time this morning, and we're now going to go over to a Q&A session. Thank you.